Hey, welcome back. We've been discussing good and evil. Now we're going to get into the really tricky subject. And this was approached by a writer named Machiavelli. In fact, it's still something that people wrestle with today, and it's a very uncomfortable topic. And he wrote about it in his book called The Prince. In Machiavelli's time, what he experienced was in the late Middle Ages, lots of warlords moving through Italy, going back and forth, and everywhere they went, they just left destruction in their wake. So this prince would attack that prince, would attack this lord, would attack that king, and what was left was ruined countrysides, destroyed villages, people, just massacred. The common person suffered tremendously, and the country as a whole actually suffered tremendously because there was no way to generate any wealth or create any capital. And so it was always this system of being fearful for your life because you never know when some invading lord was going to ride over the hill and kill you and your friends. So he wrote his book called The Prince. And the idea that he put forward was this: what is good for the people is not usually morally good for the individual. He advocated a good in a broader sense. So there was good and there was evil for the individual, but then he changed the definition of good and evil for the leader. So, for example, if a leader goes and kills his rival on the other side of the hill before the war starts, the people actually prosper. Their lives are made better. And instead of the prince taking an army to fight another army, what if he just goes and assassinates that other prince and consolidates power and then uses his power in a strongman sort of effect to keep everything pacified? Well, the common person now can grow their crops, they can prosper, they can bring things to market, they can engage in trade. And so even though this leader is committing murder, he's assassinating his rivals so that there can be no problems, it results in prosperity for the people. So anytime someone tries an uprising against this lord, he just crushes them immediately. And the people prosper. That was the idea that Machiavelli put forward, that sometimes your leaders need to do morally reprehensible things for the good of the rest of the people. And are we okay with that? And a lot of people are and aren't, and it's a really sticky subject because if it comes forward into the light too much, then we're repelled by it. But we like to actually have it happen. We just want it to happen behind the scenes, and we put the blinders on. We don't want to see it, even though we know it's happening because we're benefiting from it. So that's the real problem that Machiavelli was addressing, and he did it in his book called The Prince, and he put forward what his ideal prince would be like. It would be just like I described, someone who kept the peace for the common people and did so at all costs. Okay? He's the one who coined the phrase that the ends justify the means. So assassination is an evil thing to do. It is murder, but the end goal, I'm keeping the peace, justifies my murder of my rival. That was how Machiavelli put this forward in his thinking. Okay? That's a difficult one to deal with because do the ends justify the means? If that's the case, then I can commit any atrocity I want as long as I can convince myself and maybe some others that the things we're doing are beneficial in the end. I will achieve my utopia. In the Soviet Union, they said, all we got to do is kill 20 million people. Well, it didn't work out, did it? Okay? So you've seen this before. Hitler said, well, I will create the Third Reich. It will last for 1,000 years. All we got to do is kill millions of people first, and then we will have achieved our dreams. The ends, our dream society, justifies the means of killing all those people. And you can go through the communist revolution in China, the Russian Revolution, the killing fields in Cambodia. It's just on and on. Most of the atrocities in human history have been committed where people were convinced that the ends justified the means. So you want to be really careful with this one because it's a pretty slippery slope to tip over that edge and go right into a Holocaust. And the last century has seen several of them, and hopefully we've learned that lesson. So, other people would say that what happens is if you use evil means to achieve your ends, what you've done is you've destroyed any good in the ends by using evil means. You can't become your enemy to defeat your enemy. See, that's the lesson that a lot of our movies put forward. If you see, like Lord of the Rings, you can't just put on the ring and defeat the Dark Lord by becoming the Dark Lord, because now there's another Dark Lord. So they have to destroy the ring without becoming just like Sauron, the Dark Lord himself. And so that's the real issue that people are wrestled with throughout time, is really the problem. Okay? Machiavelli also had another quote. He said, for a leader, it is better to be feared than it is to be loved. For a leader, it's better to be feared than it is to be loved. Because he said, if a ruler is feared, then the peace is kept. No one challenges their authority. They stay on the throne, they rule the land, and everyone can engage in buying, selling, and trading and prosperity. The roads are kept, safe, because there's only one person, a strong person in charge. And you might see this today in Russia. Russia has had so many revolutions and problems and times of starvation in the last century that they've really just said, okay, look, let's find our one person. It's very Hobbesian, isn't it? Let's find our one person that we're going to put in charge, and that's as good as it's going to get. He's not going to be perfect. He might steal some money from us now and then, but hey, it's way better than the alternatives we've had in the last 100 years. And so Vladimir Putin, leader of Russia, is really this prince in a Machiavellian concept. He is the kind of person that will just keep a lid on everything so that people can basically be peaceful. And for Russia, it's been working pretty well. Okay? So, where do we see this? In American history and culture, mostly in cowboy westerns. This is the problem that people have wrestled with, and they put it in terms of a western, because you've got a lawless town where people are being oppressed and it's really bad, and in comes your sheriff, and he's a gunslinger. He's a killer, that's what he really is, but he's a good killer, so it's okay, right? And he guns down the bad guys. He basically commits murder in order to save the town from this oppression. But now what have we done? We've got this guy who's a murderer who took care of the other murderers, but we like him because he's our murderer. He's a nice guy to us. It's a difficult situation, and that's why in the cowboy western, they always ride off into the sunset, because now that they've conquered the untamed lands, now that they've brought civilization to some place, they're no longer fit to live in that civilization because they've got blood on their hands. I think the famous John Wayne movie, The Searchers, ends this way and really set the standard for this type of ideal. What do we expect out of our leaders? We expect oftentimes for them to do morally reprehensible acts that are evil in our name so that we don't have to do them and can feel good about ourselves. It's really difficult to deal with. All right? Some examples through history. Queen Elizabeth, in your histories you're going to learn that England had a very peaceful time with her extremely long rule. Well, the reason Queen Elizabeth had such a long rule is she had a follower named Walsingham, and he read the book The Prince, and he set out to make Queen Elizabeth his prince, or princess in this case. Queen Elizabeth had such a long and peaceful and prosperous rule. England came to the top of power during her time period because there were no threats to the realm. If ever there was a threat, Walsingham became her secret police force, and he basically went and killed him. So several of Queen Elizabeth's rivals just died, either at his hands or at some of his hired hands. And that's what made England so prosperous coming out of the Middle Ages. And so we don't like to talk about that because that doesn't feel good. That's not the moral superiority we'd like to have. So we tend to ignore those kind of things and just say, well, it just happened. No, it didn't happen. And this is a thing that we need to wrestle with that I don't have all the answers to. Should your leader do something against the laws of good and evil in order to benefit the common people? That's a tough question. Okay. Another one would be, in modern history, Ronald Reagan. I can remember growing up, you'll have to look it up in your history books, but I remember every month there was an airplane hijacking. And I'm talking for like 10 years. Every month you hear about a plane was hijacked today and 2 Americans were pulled off the plane and killed. And America just tolerated this for a long time, and it just kept going and going. And Ronald Reagan said, nope, I'm putting a stop to this, because we had a big explosion over Lockerbie, Scotland. People put bombs on a plane and it blew up over Scotland, and it was supposed to blow up over the ocean, but they miscalculated. Anyway, it landed on land. We figured out who the people were. They went to Libya to try and get sanctuary there, and Ronald Reagan just went after them with a vengeance, bombing and going after every place in Libya we could find them. And after that, there were no more hijackings for a long time. It wasn't until 2001 that people hijacked planes again, and then they actually flew the planes into buildings. So how do we want our leaders to respond? Did Ronald Reagan go and kill other people in Libya in revenge for this, trying to hunt these guys down? Yeah. Every time you drop bombs, the odds are pretty high you're going to kill people. But why were Americans okay with this? Because this is like the sheriff cleaning things up and doing some morally reprehensible actions in the name of making things better, because we couldn't have these hijackings continue forever. But was this a good, morally approval, type solution, or was this an atrocity committed? Those are the things we still have to wrestle with, that we're not comfortable with. And we're going to talk about it more in class.